I'm Adam Hart. I am Professor of Science Communication at the University of Gloucestershire. My work with flying ants and social insects involves working with members of the public using something called citizen science to try and get information about some of the bigger things that happen in the insect world here in the UK. One of the projects I'm working with currently is called the Big Wasp Survey, where we look at wasp abundance and distribution through the country. But another piece of work that I've been doing is looking at flying ants. Now, flying ants are one of those things that happen every summer. Everyone sort of scratches their heads, why are there so many ants flying around? The reason is mating. They are leaving their colonies where they've been produced in lots of numbers. It's queens and males. They fly up into the air, and once they're in the air, they're mating, and those queens, those females, will go and try and find a new colony. And every summer this happens very predictably, and there's an interesting question about it. Is there such a thing as Flying Ant Day? And this was one of the questions that we set out to try and solve. We wanted people from all across the UK to report when they see flying ants in their garden. Or perhaps when they're out and about. And what that let us do, what that allowed us to do, was to work out how coordinated this is across the country. If I'm down in Devon where I grew up and a friend of mine's in Glasgow, do we have flying ants on the same day? That was the sort of question we were trying to answer. Spoiler alert, actually, sometimes yes, but mostly no. It really just comes down to weather. If it's a warm day and there's low winds and it's after about mid-July, you've got a fairly good chance of seeing flying ants. It just kind of depends on the rhythm of the local colonies. So it's a really interesting way of finding out about the natural world, working in partnership with the public in this citizen science approach that lets us get a bit of information out there too. So it's a really nice way of engaging people and getting data. A typical day in any biologist's life is often quite diverse. It's quite hard to put a sort of finger on what might be a typical day. But for me, it involves a lot of communication and a lot of talking. Not just sort of teaching, talking, or lecturing, or doing broadcasting and things like that, but talking to other scientists, collaborators, talking with members of the public, communicating with people and trying to build up those networks that allow me to do the sort of science that I want to do and allow me to get involved with all kinds of other projects. You know, with things like citizen science, for example, one of the things that I've found is we're trying to sell the idea of taking part in a science project. And for quite a while, it became quite tricky sometimes to get people involved. So I started talking to people actually not that far from me in the university who work on marketing. And I think, well, okay, if you can sell a product, or you can come up with a way to, you know, sell these sorts of things that often we don't even want, right? Consumer goods we don't even want or need. Can we use a similar sort of approach to try and sell the idea of taking part in science? So yeah, all kinds of communication, opening all sorts of doors and partnerships. That's probably what I do most of the time in most of my working day. The most exciting thing I think about being a scientist, being a biologist, is that you get the chance potentially to find out something and to see something maybe for the first time ever, finding out something that nobody else knows. You know, that is an incredibly exciting thing. It doesn't happen every day. Although, you know, you often end up making a few little incremental discoveries along the way, but you have that opportunity to do that. And that is incredibly exciting and it's incredibly rewarding. So yeah, I think that's the most exciting thing about my job, is the fact that you do have that chance to perhaps see for the first time something that no one else has. To get into the role and the job that I've been doing, what sort of qualifications do you need? Well, you need to have a degree, an undergraduate degree in a sort of biological science. I did zoology at Cambridge, but you could be doing biosciences, you might do sort of animal sciences, you might do straight biology, biochemistry, those sorts of things. That will get you along the way to looking into this sort of area. Then after that, you'll probably do a master's, or maybe you'll go straight into doing a PhD, which is an advanced degree where you get to really narrow down, focus on something, study it for 3 years, produce a thesis that sort of shows, it's almost, if you like, your kind of driving license to do science. And then after that, you'll likely progress through things called postdocs or postdoctoral positions, where you're effectively like a contract researcher working on particular projects. That builds up your experience. Along the way, when I was doing my work, I was working in Brazil on the world's largest ant. I was also doing lots of bits and pieces of teaching. I was taking a field course, doing some tutoring, that sort of stuff, which gave me the experience I needed to become a lecturer. And then from that point, of course, you gain more and more experience, and you sort of climb the ladder. And I became a professor about 10 or 12 years ago. So that was my sort of career path to this point. The best advice that I can give anyone that's into biology is to keep that spark alive, particularly when you're young. When you're sort of, a young child, 5, 6, 7, if you're into biology as I was, you're lifting up rocks, you're grubbing around in everything, you're seeing what you can find, you're picking up feathers and all sorts of other stuff. Your pockets are always jammed full of little treasures. Mine are now, but I went through a time when they weren't, right? And it's a case of keeping that spark, keeping that love of the topic alive as you go through sort of being a teenager, and there's lots of other distractions and things, so that when you come out sort of teenager, sort of A-level time, and you're really getting to grips with that subject, that spark, that love of it's still there, and you can re-find it, you can rekindle it, and by the time you come on to doing a degree, you've really got that passion again. Of course, some people never lose it, and that's great if you're one of those people, but if you feel like you are but you don't want to, rest assured, lots of us have been in that position. You'll find it again, and just keep loving what you do. Don't listen to what anyone else is saying. The natural world is just about the best thing that you can get involved with studying. So just keep that alive, and keep the faith, and make sure that you follow through on your passion.